The corridors of St. Clair Hospital were silent that night, filled only with the soft beeping of machines and the rushing footsteps of anxious doctors. In the private emergency wing, a powerful mafia boss named Lorenzo De Luca paced back and forth, his eyes red, his face twisted with fear rather than fury. His only son, 8-year-old Marco, lay unconscious on the hospital bed, his breath shallow, his skin pale. For 3 days, more than 100 doctors, specialists flown in from different countries, experts in rare diseases, neurologists, toxicologists, had all examined the boy. Each one walked out shaking their head, defeated. No one knew what was wrong with him. No medicine was working. No test showed a clear cause. Every minute felt like another step toward losing him. Lorenzo, a man feared by entire cities, had never felt so helpless. He had spent his life controlling everything around him, making people disappear with a phone call, settling conflicts with a single order. But here, his power meant nothing. His money couldn't buy a cure. His threats couldn't force the diagnosis. His influence couldn't stop time. The doctors avoided his eyes, terrified of disappointing him, but even more terrified of failing to save the child. In the corner of the hallway, a man in gray overalls quietly mopped the floor. His name was Samuel Hayes, a hospital janitor who had worked there for over 25 years. Most people barely noticed him. They walked past him as if he were part of the wall. But Samuel noticed everything. He saw the panic, the fear, the tense whispers of the families, the trembling hands of doctors who didn't want to admit defeat. And he saw Lorenzo, a father who looked more broken than dangerous. Samuel had seen the boy earlier when he was cleaning the room next door. He had paused for a moment, watching the monitor numbers flicker strangely in a pattern he recognized, one he had seen many years ago, back when his own son had suffered something similar. Doctors had been confused back then too, running every test imaginable, until it was Samuel who found the cause. A rare allergic reaction triggered not by food or medicine, but by a specific type of chemical used in cleaning supplies and some imported toys. It mimicked seizure symptoms, suppressed breathing, and caused rapid deterioration. Most doctors never considered it. As he watched Marco's readings from afar, something inside Samuel whispered that it was the same thing. But he remained silent at first. After all, who would listen to a janitor? He didn't want to interfere where specialists were working. But when he overheard a doctor telling Lorenzo that they had only hours left, that nothing else could be done, Samuel felt a knot form in his chest. He couldn't stay quiet anymore. Lorenzo stood frozen in the hallway when he heard a soft voice behind him say, "Sir, I think I know what's wrong with your boy." The guards immediately stepped forward, pointing guns at the janitor. Lorenzo raised a hand, stopping them. For some reason, something in Samuel's voice didn't sound foolish, it sounded steady, calm, certain. Lorenzo turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. You're a janitor. What could you possibly know that my doctors don't?" Samuel didn't flinch. "I'm not a doctor. I won't pretend to be one. But I've seen those symptoms before. My son almost died from the same thing. And the doctors couldn't diagnose him either." Lorenzo stared hard, searching for a lie. "Keep talking," he said quietly. Samuel explained what he suspected and what needed to be checked, specifically, the boy's toys, his clothes, and the cleaning products used around him. The doctors listened reluctantly. One scoffed. Another dismissed it. But one young resident decided to run the test. Anyway, desperate for even the smallest lead. Moments later, the results confirmed Samuel was right. A rare chemical compound had indeed triggered a severe reaction in the child's body, shutting down his nervous system little by little. Once they treated Marco based on Samuel's suggestion, the boy's breathing began to stabilize. His finger twitched. His heartbeat grew stronger. And within hours, he slowly opened his eyes. Lorenzo stood frozen, tears filling his eyes. His guards, the doctors, the nurses, all watched in stunned silence. The mafia boss, feared by so many, gently knelt beside his son, whispering, "Papa's here, my boy." Then he turned to Samuel. For the first time in years, Lorenzo bowed his head to someone. "You saved my son," he said quietly. "Tell me what you want." "Anything." Samuel shook his head. "I don't want anything, sir. I just did what any father would do." But Lorenzo wasn't satisfied. He grabbed Samuel's hand firmly, the kind of grip that carried gratitude deeper than words. "From today," he said, "you're not invisible. Not to me. If you ever need something, anything, you come to me." Samuel simply nodded, picked up his mop, and continued his work, leaving everyone speechless. They realized that night that sometimes miracles don't come from the most educated people, the richest men, or the most powerful experts. Sometimes, they come from the quietest soul in the room, the one nobody notices, but who pays attention to everything. The night had sunk deep into the city, wrapping St. Clair Hospital in a heavy silence broken only by the clicking of hurried footsteps and whispered orders. Inside a tightly guarded private room, a mafia boss known as Lorenzo De Luca stood helpless beside his unconscious son. The boy's weak breaths and pale lips haunted him more violently than any gunshot he had ever faced. Doctors surrounded the bed, staring at monitors that displayed collapsing vitals, but none of them had answers. Specialists had been flown in from 3 different countries, yet every diagnosis failed. Every treatment made things worse. Fear had replaced fury in Lorenzo's heart, and that fear made him feel powerless for the first time in his life. His men waited outside the door, tense and silent, ready to strike at anyone who wasted a second of their boss's time. But none of those men could shoot their way through this problem. Money couldn't solve it. Threats couldn't solve it. Status couldn't solve it. Lorenzo watched another doctor slip out of the room with trembling hands, refusing to meet his eyes. That silent cowardice told Lorenzo everything. No one knew what was killing his son. While chaos filled the expensive corridors, a quiet figure pushed a cleaning cart nearby. Samuel Hayes, the hospital janitor, moved with slow, practiced steps. Most people never saw him, even when he stood inches away. He blended into the background, his gray uniform as unnoticed as the walls. But Samuel saw everything, especially the human pain others ignored. He saw the desperation in the mafia boss's eyes, and it reminded him of his past, his own son lying on a hospital bed years ago, with the same unexplained symptoms, the same medical confusion, and the same ticking clock. Doctors had nearly given up on his boy too. The memory still lived inside him like a wound that never healed. Samuel paused near the doorway and looked at Marco, the little boy wrapped in wires and tubes. The monitors blinked in a rhythm Samuel recognized instantly. His heart tightened. It couldn't be a coincidence. He had seen this exact pattern before. His son had survived only because Samuel had fought the doctors until they tested for a rare chemical reaction. The cause had been something so simple yet so unusual, an imported cleaning agent. Triggering an allergic collapse. Doctors had ignored his concerns then because he was just a janitor. But he had been right. Samuel spent several minutes watching from a distance, debating whether to speak up. He knew what it meant to challenge professionals in a place obsessed with hierarchy. And this wasn't just any parent, this was Lorenzo De Luca, a man known for burning down entire businesses when someone crossed him. But as Samuel watched Lorenzo's shoulders slump under grief, he felt something inside him whisper that he couldn't stay silent. The boy's life mattered more than fear. Taking a slow breath, Samuel approached. The guards immediately tensed. One reached for his weapon. Samuel raised his hand slightly, not out of fear, but respect. In a soft voice, he said, "Sir, I think I can help your boy." The hallway froze. Lorenzo slowly turned, his expression dark and tired. "You're a janitor," he said, voice low. 100 doctors have already failed. What makes you think you know anything? Samuel met his gaze calmly. "Because I've seen this before. My son almost died from the same symptoms. And the doctors didn't recognize it either." Lorenzo studied him, unsure whether to dismiss him or listen. Something about Samuel's eyes, steady, sincere, unshaken, made him wave his guards back. "Speak." Samuel explained the rare chemical reaction, how it affected breathing, heart rhythm, and nerve function. The doctors in the room scoffed, some offended, others impatient. But a young resident, desperate for a clue, asked Samuel detailed questions. Samuel answered with surprising accuracy, describing symptoms only someone who had lived through the nightmare could know. The resident ran the recommended tests, and within minutes, the truth emerged. A chemical found in one of the boy's imported toys had triggered a severe reaction. None of the doctors had tested for it because it was nearly unknown in their country. The room erupted into motion. Treatments were adjusted. Antidotes were rushed in. Nurses hurried. Machines adjusted their tones as Marco's condition began to stabilize. Lorenzo watched in stunned disbelief as his son's breathing deepened and the color slowly returned to his cheeks. When Marco's eyelids flickered open, the mafia boss felt his world collapse into relief. He placed a trembling hand on his son's forehead, whispering his name again and again, as if afraid this miracle would disappear. Then his gaze slowly shifted to Samuel. For a long moment, no one breathed. Everyone expected the boss to lash out, to demand explanations, to punish the doctors. Instead, Lorenzo walked toward Samuel, stopping right in front of him. The powerful mafia leader bowed his head slightly, not in weakness but in gratitude. "You saved my boy," he said, his voice rough. "I can never repay that. But I will try." He stepped closer. "From this day, you are under my protection. If you ever need me, for anything, you come directly to me." Samuel nodded gently. "I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because I know what it feels like to almost lose a child." Lorenzo's expression softened, something few had ever seen. "That's why you deserve more than any doctor here." Samuel quietly picked up his mop and returned to his work. The doctors watched him with a mix of shame and awe. The guards stepped aside respectfully. And Lorenzo stood there, realizing that the man everyone overlooked had been the only one with the courage, and the knowledge, to save his son. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the most unexpected people. And sometimes the quietest man in the room carries the loudest miracle. The sun had not yet risen, but the hospital halls glowed with the soft blue light of early morning. Nurses moved quietly, patients slept, and the night shift prepared to hand over their duties. The chaos of the previous day had faded, but the memory of one remarkable moment still hung in the air, how a janitor had saved the mafia boss's dying son when 100 doctors could not. People whispered about it all night. Some in disbelief, others in embarrassment, and a few in admiration. But no one felt it more deeply than Lorenzo De Luca himself. He had spent the entire night sitting beside his son's bed, watching Marco sleep peacefully for the first time in days. The boy's breathing was steady now, his skin warm, and his heartbeat strong. Every few minutes, Lorenzo brushed his son's hair back, making sure the nightmare wasn't returning. His men stood outside the room, guarding the corridor, but inside, there was only a father and his child, not a mafia boss and an heir. As the sky began to lighten, Marco stirred. His eyes fluttered open slowly. When he saw his father leaning over him, tears broke across Lorenzo's face. Marco lifted his small hand weakly and whispered, "Papa." That one word shattered the last of Lorenzo's fear. He hugged his son gently, promising he would be okay, promising he would take him home soon. But beneath the relief was another feeling, a heavy gratitude toward the janitor who made this possible. An hour later, Lorenzo stepped out into the hallway. Doctors rushed to greet him, eager to update him, but he brushed past them without saying a word. His mind wasn't on them. He wanted to find the man who had saved his son. As he walked down the corridor, nurses whispered, bowing their heads. They all knew whom he was searching for. He found Samuel in the basement level, pushing his cleaning cart through a dimly lit hallway. Samuel worked quietly, humming a soft tune, completely unaware that a mafia boss and 6 armed guards were approaching him. When he finally noticed, he instinctively stood up straighter, confused but not afraid. Lorenzo paused a few feet away, staring at the older man in front of him. Samuel's uniform was faded, his shoes worn, but his presence felt steady and unshakable. Lorenzo had met presidents, billionaires, and crime lords, but none had ever commanded silent respect the way this gentle janitor did. "Why didn't you come see me?" Lorenzo asked quietly. Samuel blinked, unsure what he meant. "Sir, I didn't think you needed me anymore. Your boy is safe now." Lorenzo shook his head. "He's safe because of you. And I will never forget that." Samuel wiped his hands on his uniform and nodded humbly. "I'm glad I could help. That's all." But Lorenzo wasn't finished. He stepped forward. "Tell me something. How did you know what the doctors didn't? How did you see what they missed?" Samuel smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hid decades of struggle. "When my son was sick, everyone gave up on him. Doctors couldn't find the reason. I spent nights researching, asking questions, reading every medical book I could get my hands on. I'm just a janitor, sir, but that doesn't mean I can't learn. Pain teaches people things they never expect. Lorenzo was silent. Those words weighed heavily on him. He had always believed power came from strength, money, reputation. But here stood a man who gained his power from something far deeper: experience, heart, and quiet observation. You should not be cleaning floors, Lorenzo said finally. A man with your mind, your instincts, your courage, you deserve more. Samuel's eyes softened. This job lets me help people in small ways. I'm not looking for a bigger life. But you saved my world, Lorenzo replied. And I won't let your life stay small because of that. He pulled out a small envelope from inside his coat. Inside was a card, a personal contact number known only to his closest men. This number is for emergencies, Lorenzo said. Any emergency. If you ever face danger, if you ever need money, if your family ever struggles, you call me. And whatever you ask, I will deliver. Samuel hesitated before taking it. You don't owe me anything. That's where you're wrong, Lorenzo said softly. I owe you everything. A long silence passed between them. Then Samuel finally accepted the card, slipping it quietly into his pocket. No dramatic words, no emotional speeches, just a simple nod. Meanwhile, far above them on the main floor, the hospital staff gathered around Marco's room, whispering excitedly. They had seen Lorenzo go downstairs, and they knew he had gone to meet Samuel. Some admired the janitor. Others rolled their eyes. A few felt ashamed. One doctor muttered, I spent 10 years studying medicine. And a janitor beat us all. Another doctor, older and wiser, corrected him gently. He didn't beat us. He saw the child as a person, not a puzzle. That's something we forget sometimes. Back in the basement, Lorenzo extended his hand. Samuel shook it firmly. For a moment, their worlds, so different, so distant, became one. Before turning to leave, Lorenzo said, You may think your life is small, Samuel. But understand this, small lights often save people lost in the darkest places. Samuel watched as the Mafia boss walked away, disappearing into the elevator. Then he picked up his mop and continued his work. Nothing about the hallway had changed. But everything about his place in the world had. Above him, Marco slept peacefully, alive because of a man nobody saw, until the day his whispered words became the loudest truth in the room.